Good morning and welcome to today's live lesson for AS English. As we are nearing the exams, I really wanted to carry on focusing on sample responses written by candidates to typical exam questions. So once again, for the month of September, we're going to look at sample candidate responses. We're going to look at things like paper one passages. We're going to look at things like directed writing and imaginative writing and writing for an audience. So we'll do each section for each week of September. And welcome to those of you who have just joined. Okay, so let me share my screen with you. And here we go. So this is the booklet that you can look up online for yourselves as well. I think I've told you that before. If you type in paper 19093 example candidate responses, you should be able to find this booklet online. Okay. And just before I get started, I'm going to open up the chat box. Good morning, nice to see you. So that if you have any questions as I go through this paper, please feel free to ask them, or anything you want to contribute, you're really welcome to do that. All right, so let's have a look. This is paper 1. We're going to look at question 1A, a sample response, the extract, a sample response, and then the examiner's response to the candidate's response. Okay. Right, so this is based on paper 1 passages from October, November 2016. So quite a recent paper. And usually you are compelled to do question 1. Okay, so this is the question 1 sample. And we're only going to be looking at A today, the commentary. So it says, and I think I should just make this a bit bigger so you can see what's going on a bit better. Yeah, there we go. The passage below is a speech made by Julia Gillard, Australian Prime Minister, in response to an attempt by the leader of the opposition, Tony Abbott, to remove the Speaker or the Chair of the Australian Parliament from office because of supposed sexist remarks made by text message by this person. But obviously in this speech, just be aware that Julia Gillard does not agree with this stance. She takes her own stance and instead turns the attack around on the Speaker or the Chair to her opposition, her opponent, Tony Abbott. Okay. All right, so keep in mind it's a speech. Keep in mind she's going to direct it at the opposition leader, the opposing party. Thank you very much, Deputy Speaker, the person who the original sexist remarks accusation is made. Thank you very much, Deputy Speaker. And I rise to oppose the motion moved by the leader of the opposition. And in so doing, I say to the leader of the opposition, I will not be lectured about sexism and misogyny, which is hatred for women. I will not be lectured about sexism and misogyny by this man, the leader of the opposition. I will not, and the government will not be lectured about sexism and misogyny by this man. Not now, not ever. The leader of the opposition says that people who hold sexist views and who are misogynists are not appropriate for high office. While I hope the leader of the opposition has got a piece of paper and he is writing out his own resignation. Because if he wants to know what misogyny looks like in modern Australia, he doesn't need a motion in the House of Representatives. He needs a mirror. That's what he needs. Let's go through the opposition leader's repulsive double standards when it comes to misogyny and sexism. We are now supposed to take seriously that the leader of the opposition is offended by Mr. Slipper's text messages, when this is the leader of the opposition who has said, and this was when he was a minister under the last government, not when he was a student, not when he was in high school, when he was a minister under the last government. He has said, and I quote, in a discussion about women being underrepresented in institutions of power in Australia, the interviewer was a man called Stavros. The leader of the opposition says, if it's true, Stavros, that men have more power, generally speaking, than women, is that a bad thing? And then a discussion ensues, and another person says, I want my daughter to have as much opportunity as my son. To which the leader of the opposition says, yeah, I completely agree, but what if men are, by physiology or temperament, more adapted to exercise authority or to issue command? Then ensues another discussion about women's role in modern society, and the other person participating in the discussion says, I think it's very hard to deny that there's an underrepresentation of women. To which the leader of the opposition says, but now there's an assumption that this is a bad thing. This is the man from whom we're supposed to take lectures about sexism. And then, of course, it goes on. I was very offended personally when the leader of the opposition as Minister of Health said, and I quote, abortion is the easy way out. I was very personally offended by those comments. You said that in March 2004. I suggest you check the records. I was also very offended on behalf of the women of Australia when, in the course of this carbon pricing campaign, the leader of the opposition said, what the housewives of Australia need to understand as they do the ironing. Thank you for that painting of women's roles in modern Australia. And then, of course, I was offended too by the sexism, by the misogyny of the leader of the opposition, catcalling across this table at me as I sit here as Prime Minister. If the Prime Minister wants to, politically speaking, make an honest woman of herself, and this reference here pertains to the fact that the Prime Minister here who's speaking was not married. She had a partner, but she was not married to him at this point in time, which is why the leader of the opposition pointed this out in Parliament as if it was a bad thing, okay? If the Prime Minister wants to, politically speaking, make an honest woman of herself, something that would never have been said to any man sitting in this chair. I was offended when the leader of the opposition went outside in the front of Parliament and stood next to a sign that said, ditch the witch. Okay, let's move on down. And now the leader of the opposition wants to be taken seriously. Apparently he's woken up after this track record and all of these statements, and he's woken up and he's gone, oh dear, there's this thing called sexism. Oh my lord, there's this thing called misogyny. Now who's one of them? Oh, the speaker must be, because that suits my political purpose. So note the sarcasm. Doesn't turn a hair about any of his past statements. Doesn't walk into this Parliament and apologize to the women of Australia. Doesn't walk into this Parliament and apologize to me for the things that have come out of his mouth. But now seeks to use this as a battering ram against someone else. Well, this kind of hypocrisy must not be tolerated, which is why this motion from the leader of the opposition should not be taken seriously. Okay, so just to reiterate, this is the Prime Minister of Australia. She's trying to defend the Speaker, the Chair, the person who sort of mediates between the two factions, two main parties. He's trying to say that he should not be removed, even if he made some sort of text messages, because let's look at who's trying to remove the chair, and there's possibly some sort of political desire behind removing the chair, and this just happens to be a good excuse for that removal. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. All right, if not, send me a query. Yes, she gave a very, very strong speech. It's very well done. She's obviously done her research. She's thought about what she wanted to say. And she's worded it very well. So now let's look at how a candidate answered the question, the first question. Just comment on the style and language of the extract. And this is one of typically 4 kinds of questions you can get in this section, whereby you have to look at something specific maybe in terms of the style and language, but here it's just a general open style and language. In other words, look at what is said and how it is said. Okay, that's what you have to do, and you have to work through the extract methodically from the beginning through to the middle, down to the end, and then give an overview of what you think. Well, that's how it should really work, usually work. So, question A, example candidate response. This was a high mark that was given to them. They were given an A. All right, so keep that in mind as we work through this. And I'm sorry, sometimes I couldn't decipher the handwriting, so I want you to just read as fluently as I can because it's quite a long response. And I had to rewrite some of the words I can't immediately make out. Miss Gillard's speech is characterized by strong emotive language, yes it is, and accusatory, outraged tone. She is accusatory and she is outraged. It is written in a thought-provoking manner and exposes the flaws of the leader of the opposition. So the examiner liked this introduction because it says immediate and purposeful assessment of the tone of the passage. We know what's going to be explored here, her speech and how it is strong, how it's emotive, how it's accusatory, how it's outraged, how it is thought-provoking. So remember, in your introduction, try to sum up what it is you're going to be looking at in a kind of brief, succinct way, okay, but meaningful. Okay, let's look at the next paragraph. Now she goes into language. The repetition of the assertion that she and the rest of the government will not be misled by Abbott shows Gillard's strong will and conviction. Yes, it does. So always note things like repetition or other devices. It makes her assertion feel like law, something that must not be gone against. The attention of the audience is held firmly, and they feel compelled to listen to her. I'm always worried about these kind of generic statements that could be given about any speech, that the audience is held firmly and that they feel compelled to listen to her. Is that so? Is the audience really? I mean, what about the opposition party? Do they care? So just be careful about those kind of sweeping statements. But all right, the examiner let it pass. And the examiner said here, a perceptive awareness of the effective language. Here, this idea of it makes her assertion feel like law. Okay. Let's go to this next part. She refers to Abbott repeatedly as this man. Such a phrase resonates as slight loathing, contempt, and disgust. Okay? By choosing not to give him a name or title here, she reduces his influence and importance in the eyes of the audience. Very good. So here, looking at what the effect of something does. Why refer to him as this man? Because she wants to belittle him, okay, and show him how ridiculous his behavior is. She uses such a common article. It's not a common article, it's a common noun. Man, city, car, cat, dog. There's a common noun, so there was a mistake here, but it doesn't matter. Well, the examiner overlooked this. She uses such a common article, subtly stripping him of some of the dignity his position would give him. And yes, perhaps it's dignity, but also power or influence. And the examiner liked this idea of the common noun, this use of the common noun, this man, a developed account, albeit imperfectly expressed, of the effect of one phrase in diminishing Mr. Abbott's authority. Just the one phrase that does that and how it functions. Okay. And then, oh, very nice suggestion. Here's a suggestion come through. You're saying that, can you perhaps say something like, seemingly capturing the attention of the audience? Yes. Then it changes the whole thing. Seemingly capturing. Good suggestion. Seemingly capturing. Then you could argue that yes, because it's so powerful, because we are taken aback by the emotion that the speech is delivered with, perhaps it would. And so therefore, if you put that word seemingly in, it changes the whole context of the statement. So good. Yes, you could say that, and then it could be accepted. She begins her speech by thanking the deputy speaker. As protocol dictates, this is how Parliament takes place. You stand up, you acknowledge the deputy speaker, and what this does is this shows the marker, the examiner, that you have great general knowledge, that you are aware of how these systems work, and they like that. They like that you know that protocol dictates this. What a wonderful way to express this idea. Okay. So she begins her speech by thanking the deputy speaker as protocol dictates. However, she continues that mundane sentence with and. So let's just have a very quick look at what this person is saying. Thank you very much, Deputy Speaker, and I rise to oppose the motion moved by the Leader of the Opposition. She gets straight into what she wants to get to. She doesn't want to put the focus on the Deputy Speaker, Mr. Slippers. She wants to focus on Tony Abbott, the Leader of the Opposition. Okay. So let's see what this candidate is saying. She continues that mundane sentence, hello, Deputy Speaker, with and. This small word fosters anticipation and grabs attention. Her opening paragraph is characterized by the repetition of I, which again conveys strong will and suggests that she thinks highly of her own opinions, thoughts, and convictions. So she strongly believes in what she is saying. Oh, albeit. Okay, so you're asking, what does albeit mean? It means although. It's similar to although. So one thing happens, although actually it's something else. So that's what albeit means, similar to the concept of the word although. Good, I'm glad you're asking questions. The opening paragraph is ended by her refusal to be misled, neither now nor ever. Okay, she refuses to be misled, and if you looked at that, you'll see now and never are we going to listen to this man. And what the candidate then goes on to correctly do is to identify what's being used here. Hyperbole. Now or ever. Now, hyperbole is deliberate exaggeration for the sake of effect, okay? Forever. When you tell somebody, I will love you forever, that is kind of deliberate exaggeration. You want to exaggerate just how much you love the person. Can you really love them forever? Can we love someone after we've passed away? Who knows? We don't know. So this is a hyperbole, an example of hyperbole. And ever, 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 ever is an example of exaggeration. So this candidate is aware of devices, and they can adequately explain how they are used. The hyperbole here connotes, has secondary connotations, that to believe Abbott would be a grave sin of sorts, something never to be committed. And here the examiner liked this. It was recognition of the accumulated effect of repeated negatives. Not now, not ever. Okay, and this makes it sound like some kind of grave sin to believe anything that Abbott says. That's what she's doing there by using that hyperbole. Okay, so this is why you need to study what these kind of devices do, figures of speech do. What do metaphors do? What do similes do? What does the hyperbole do? What's an oxymoron? All of these kind of things. Have that sort of in your grammar bag to pull out, okay, and to use if you need it. All right. Now, she also sounds resolute. Yes, she does, and unwilling to change. Qualities of a leader that make the audience listen. So she is very, very firm. It's true. By repeating what Abbott says or by quoting him, Gillard aims to show the sincerity and credibility of her speech. The audience is moved to accept what she says as true because it is backed by seemingly ample evidence. I don't know if it shows sincerity, but perhaps it does. It shows how strongly she's obviously kept these ideas in her mind when she was hurt by whatever Abbott said. And so perhaps that is why it's sincere, because she'll go back to things like, but remember when he said X, Y, Z? Or perhaps she has a research team who's found this information for her. We don't know. But it does come across as quite sincere, and that and it's credible because she has backed up her points with references to what he said in the past. Okay. She uses indirect language, asserting that it was time for Abbott to write out his resignation. Okay, so indirectly she's saying you should be leaving, you should be going because you're the one that's actually guilty. She refers to Abbott as a sexist and a misogynist without actually saying so, and is still understood by her audience. I do think maybe she doesn't say it directly to him, but she'll refer to this sexism and this misogyny is not acceptable. So she doesn't say you are a sexist, you are a misogynist. She just kind of says it indirectly. And that's why perhaps the person thinks it's indirect. This creates a rapport, a connection between herself and those listening to her. This invisible, small, yet important bond is fortified. This bond between her and the audience is fortified as she stops using the article I and starts using the article we, or the pronoun we instead. Okay, so if there's perspective changes from I and becomes more inclusive we, make note of it. That's an important thing to note. She's trying to build unity, trying to build a strong opposition. Okay. This has the effect of creating a rift between she and the audience, comma, and he, Abbott. So she and the audience are against Abbott, in other words. Okay. And they love this use of the word fortified. Excellent choice of verb. Yeah, she is fortifying the bond there between herself and the audience. Gillard makes good use of the imperative, which is when you command somebody to do something. Sit, open the door, or eat, or those kind of verbs that force you to do something. It's like a commanding verb. Gillard makes use of the imperative, declaring boldly what it is that Abbott needs. This word connotes absolute necessity. It shows the degree to which the leader of the opposition is out of line by using it. In the same breath, she uses symbolism of mirror to say something indirectly, yet still being understood. The mirror represents honest self-examination, which implies that Abbott, who has failed to look at himself, is somehow incompetent. And the examiner loved this because it was a perceptive paragraph, especially in dealing with the significance of the mirror, because at one point she says, take a look in the mirror, and we have to insinuate, work out what she means by that, right? But we know what she means. You are a hypocrite. Just take a look in the mirror. And here, a mature understanding of language is demonstrated. The fact that doing that shows he is incompetent is a very good deduction to make, to work towards. Okay, so this candidate uses language well. The repetition of repulsive double standards reiterates the graveness of Abbott's attitudes and consolidates it in the minds of the audience. She also repeats she's supposed to put up with this hypocrisy, which makes the entire situation seem much more unreasonable. Okay, I'm just going to stop there. Don't ever have a letter separated from the word it's a part of, okay? Because it doesn't make sense. She, and then the letter S. Okay, keep it together. She also repeats she's supposed to put up with this hypocrisy, which makes the entire situation seem much more unreasonable. It also rings of shared exasperation that she fraternizes with everyone else. And here I think fraternizes is used incorrectly, because when you fraternize with someone, you are socializing with them, you are mixing with them, you are consorting with them. So yes, they have a shared exasperation, but they share that with each other. They don't fraternize it with each other. So I think there's a bit of a vocab issue there, but the marker didn't make any comment. She provides a series of scenarios in her third paragraph, which would have been better, and repeats not before each scenario, which has the effect of augmenting the atrocity, the crime of the misogynist and sexist phrase said. She makes his fault seem far worse than at first. She also repeats that she was very offended personally, a sandwich of emotive language. She sandwiches her feelings as very offended personally, stuck together like a sandwich. How interesting. What an interesting way to phrase something. Very in itself connotes an acute degree of something, yes. Offended paints Abbott as in an unfavorable light, that of a man careless with words, one who verbally abuses women. Personally makes the people sympathize with her, instantly winning them over. And here the examiner has said an acute analysis of a 3-word phrase, this very offended personally, sandwich of emotive words is particularly apt, and demonstrating an understanding of construction and effect. So in other words, the examiner really liked that idea, that metaphor, a sandwich of emotive words. Okay, so we're going to run out of a bit of time, and this essay carries on quite a bit. But what I'm going to do here is I'm going to look at the very last final section here, and I'm going to look at the comments on how this person could have improved. So I'm just going to read the last 2 paragraphs, and we'll look at the comment. Then Gillard begins to mock Abbott by mentioning firstly that he had suddenly woken up. This suggests that he had been lazily slumbering on instead of doing his job, which connotes incompetence on his part, yet again. She begins to speak in the first person with phrases such as, oh dear, and the notion that Abbott's actions are perfect for his political purpose. This has a slightly comic, because she does it quite humorously, comic, but practical and logical appeal. Lastly, she repeats the word doesn't as she mentions all the things that Abbott neglects to do. This has the effect of pointing out and leaving plain all his imperfections and his incompetence. Okay, so this candidate has moved through the section. Sorry, we missed a little bit out at near the end, but she's moved through it methodically. He makes an overall observation here with lastly. And using these kind of signposting words really helps your marker because it indicates that you're summing something up. And it's nicer to say lastly or finally or overall rather than in conclusion, which sounds a bit formulaic. Okay. So at number 10, the marker says a succinct but significant final paragraph which summarizes both a particular effect and that of the whole passage. And that's why I'm saying when you look at all the detail and you do, just as the speaker has been doing, as the writer has been doing, you examine everything and what it actually implies, what's going on here. And you come to that conclusion, take a step back, look at the whole, and just comment on what she's actually doing here. She's belittling him just as he has belittled her to showing how he is imperfect. He's not perfect and that he's incompetent. That's ultimately what she's trying to do. So, try and keep that sort of thing in mind when you have to do this. This person got 15 out of 15. Now, I suspect it's because they expressed themselves so eloquently, they had very original ideas about things, and because they worked methodically through the extract and they produced quite a long response. Even though there were faults in parts, the faults were so minor that I think they got overlooked. Here's a question. What does apt mean? It means appropriate. Apt, when something is apt, it's appropriate. Okay. All right, so how the candidate could have improved the answer. Wow, 15 out of 15 is quite good. A perceptive and sometimes penetrating analysis of the passage, which married specific language examples, usually correctly identified, to the intention of the speaker and the accumulated impact of the passage. A few points were omitted or not fully developed. These included the allocation of separate paragraphs for the mounting list of accusations and the final inability of the speaker to allow Mr. Abbott any personal pronoun at all. However, as the mark testified, this was a very good answer indeed, with an excellent understanding of the nuances of language and of the rhetorical devices, figures of speech, which the speaker employs, band 1. Okay. So, in other words, if you know language and how it functions, then you'll be able to produce a good commentary like this. Go into detail, but also look at the overall picture. Okay, we've come to the end of our live lesson. Thank you so much for joining me.